can put it whenever you want.
Like the back, like cool people.
Whatever works for you.
Oh, right.
Hello.
We're like here.
Just say something.
Hello, hello, hello,
Maybe put it a little up. Yeah.
hello, hello. No, no,
No.
no. Hello, hello. Oh, right.
Yeah. What's the best position?
Hello, hello, hello. Un, deux, un, deux, un, deux. La poule et pomme des œufs. Wow.
Okay, no worries.
You can make it louder,
Sorry.
and then you.
Yeah. Hello, hello. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hello, 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 hello. Yeah. Doing. I don't know. The tech.
Make sure you just speak loud, bro. Because
Okay.
even from here, it's picking me up lightly.
Okay, yeah, I suppose I'll, yeah, that's
Okay,
good.
right.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. Oh, okay. I should stop talking.
To turn himself off is because it's going to come through on the live stream.
Okay.
Okay, so.
So if you want, you could. I've combined the two, so when you're speaking now,
Yeah.
you'll be able to hear from both sides.
Okay. Awesome.
You can make the announcement and tell everyone to come.
Yeah. All right.
And then I will change it after to just.
All right. But we'll keep using this one as well. Is that all right?
yeah, that's fine.
All right. If I can ask everyone to start taking their seats, because we're gonna start in about 10 or maybe 2 minutes, probably. 1 minute. All right. Everyone has a seat. Great. Welcome everyone to the Visualizing Data London and to the beautiful Microsoft Reactor. Thank you very much for choosing to spend the pre-bank holiday weekend Thursday evening with us. I'm pretty sure it's going to be worth it. We have some amazing speakers. The structure of the evening is going to be we're going to do 2 talks, then we'll do a break, which you can use to check out the new issue of the Market Cafe magazine in the back. Then we're going to do a last speaker and an announcement section. So you can start thinking about if you had something to plug. It could be an event or a job position that you're trying to fill or anything else. Also, very exciting, for the first time, we are live on YouTube. So if there's anyone watching, hello from London. It's 7 p.m. here. And I think we've just finished all the pizza we had. First things first, our meetup is supported by Signal Noise, which is why we're gonna kick things off with Victor, head of product at Signal Noise, who's gonna tell us a few words.
Thank you, Zdenek. Hi, everybody. Really happy to be supporting this event because we really want to build a community around thinking about data and visualizing data and what that means. So that's why we do it. Just so you know a little bit about us and what we're up to, Signal Noise really specializes in reinventing how people see and use data. And it's not just about persuasion, inspiring, and exciting, but where are the business opportunities that we can actually create new meaning from that data? How are we rethinking not only the presentation of the data, but the collection of the data itself? Because sometimes you have a dream or a vision for a new product or service, but you don't necessarily have the data to actually be data-driven yet. So where does that all fit together? We're very sector agnostic. We work, and actually there's a variety of Signal Noise alumni in the crowd, so I'm preaching to the choir a little bit, but for those of you who don't know, we work in everything from automotive to financial services. And for us, it's really about creating three types of outputs. One is stories. So how do we tell stories with data? And that could be working with a journalistic organization or with a company to explain a data set to a large public. The other is actually creating products. So how do we create new products and services around data? And there we work in a variety of spaces where there's a larger volume of information and a small amount of time to act on it, whether that's in financial services or in automotive or in manufacturing. That's where really I come into play, thinking through what we could or should be making in the next 3 to 5 years for our clients. And even thinking even further than that, some of our clients come to us to think about futures, which means what should we be doing in terms of our organization in the next 5 to 10 years, and how do we actually begin to evidence that, not through a bunch of functional specs, but through some prototypes that we can begin to communicate the business value of where a company's going to go. To give you a small taste of what that looks like, we have a little show reel. Oh, sorry, click.
It's not playing, right?
Volume. If anybody wants to play some music in the background. There you go, louder. Here, keep going.
We might try to do this one more time. Although you did great. Yeah. I think you might have broken it, Victor.
I'm known to do that.
That's the only explanation I have.
I broke it, I'm sorry. You play a test sound? Nope. Nope.
Gigi, where's the sound? Oh, no, it's spoilers. They're not hiring it.
We can't hire, the video doesn't work. I'm going home now, bye.
Is the audio any good?
It helps. Just a little mood music, but I can talk about it.
You could talk about the hiring thing and then go show the show reel.
Yeah, why don't I do that?
Do you want to do that? Just people on YouTube are, impatient.
Yeah, I'll keep the YouTube crowd going. So we're growing a lot, and one of the reasons we sponsor this event is we really want to find great new people to help us work with us. So I'll tell you a little bit about some of the roles that we're looking for. And one of the things that we're really looking for is people who can be really interdisciplinary and think across not only the problems, but their actual specialties as well. I'll tell you a little bit about the role. So when we talk about a data design lead, we're talking about someone probably has 6 to 8 years of experience. You probably want to start thinking about how you're going to relate not just to the work day to day, but with clients as well, and really think through the problems. But there it's very much about someone who already has a strong belief that data is a material that you can work with. How do you collect it? How do you work with it? How do you make sense of it? and then how do you express it visually and through interaction. Senior creative developer, we're looking very much for, again, people who like to experiment in code, sketch in code in a variety of different ways. It could be visual, it could be auditory, it could be physical in the way we're interacting with things, but someone who's very open and looking at different frameworks. From a UI design perspective, what we're really looking for is people who really care about being pixel perfect and the fit and finish of a UI. How do you actually execute on it? Similarly, for a data designer, it's very much about the core execution in what we're actually creating from a data visualization standpoint, but you really want to be much more of a person who's much more hands-on. From a product design lead, if you've been working 8 to 10 years in the industry across a variety of different sorts of products and services, whether that's television or in financial services or in mobile, what we want is people who can think across those things and help our clients think strategically about what they could or should be building and leading the projects through to development. Interaction designers for us are people who really think about the larger systems and how people are interacting. You might notice that I don't actually use the word user experience in any of these titles. It's a bit of a religious thing with me. I think user experience is something that everybody shares as a discipline that actually does that, but it's really about the interaction between people and systems that's the important part there, which is why we tend to think more about interaction designers as opposed to, say, user experience designers. Happy to talk about all those roles. I'll be here all evening. There's a bunch of other people here from Signal Noise as well. But I'll let you guys continue with the evening, if that makes sense. And if you want to see that show reel, it's on our website. So signal-noise.co.uk. There's lots of nice flashy stuff that looks cool. Thanks.
Thank you. Sorry about that. That literally never happened to me before. All right, so we're gonna start with our first speaker, who's a former designer from Signal Noise, and he's gonna talk about what I understood is the story of his life. So please give it up for Jeff Roy.
Hello, hello. Hi, my name is Geoffroy Gaborio. I am a cognitive design expert at Teradata, and the purpose of this presentation is to take you through a journey from my design world into the data world, and how I coped with it as well. As you can see, this design journey started quite early on. Whoa. Didn't do the beatbox. And I wanted to be a designer at the age of 6, 8, 7, 9, something. Very early. I didn't even know what designer was, but I just know that it sounded cool and that they were doing drawings all the time. So I joined product design school. And we were drawing for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week for 4 years. So it got me to sort of know how to sketch and also learn about the process of how to tackle a project and think about how to build a product. So it applies to physical product, but also digital product, as I discovered lately. This is my first gig as sign designer in the countryside in France. Then I moved on to luggage and bag design in Lyon. And I got to do some illustration for kids. That was quite fun. And I moved to London, as you can see with the cool flag. And I studied HTML and CSS. So, yeah, I'm a developer, man. Yeah, very, very interesting because I could see the design, but applied to a very different material than print or physical product. It was actually on the screen, and you could do like interaction with it. It was not just flat. You could make something move. Very nice. Then I was hired in London as a UI designer. So it was in 2012. So Microsoft came up with this new Windows 8 thing and Metro design style guide. and they hired us to build plethora of application for their app store because they had nothing at the beginning, obviously. So it was like a factory of Windows 8, Windows Phone, Xbox application, and I worked very closely with the IA, information architect. So I got to learn as well how to do user experience, information architecture, how to build and navigate through an application or a website. Very, very interesting guy, and he was like super talented, so that was good mentorship. Until one day, I received a call from a recruiter telling me about a job, an opening job as data science, in a data science company, and they needed data visualization designer. I said, yeah, I know nothing about data, so why not? That sounds like a good thing to do. And this is the representation of my first weeks or first 2 weeks there. They were talking, saying words and drawing stuff on whiteboards like math and algorithm and data stuff that all servers as well, and like Git stuff, and wow, like yeah. So this was how I felt during the time, like still like a lot of rainbows and unicorns like in my head. Interesting, but I was wondering, like, is it the right job for me? Like, did I actually choose the right thing? And I got a first, so we got a first contract to do a pitch for a client. So I went into the meeting. There were, so this was a kickoff meeting. The idea was to, the project was about having a lot of question and hypotheses and gather as many scientists as possible to come up with innovations and groundbreaking ideas steered around 3 main themes: water, energy, and the future of cities. So the idea was like, you have ideas, and then the most popular, the most relevant one, and the one that were like the most feasible would go through stages. And there was 3 stages, and at the end, the idea was to keep only 3 big ideas that would then be funded and go further in the process. So I was, they were talking, and I was trying to make sense of what they were saying. And I was sketching on my notebook, and then I showed a notebook to them. So it was like the CEO, the chief designer. There were only chief people, chief, and the designer. And I showed them the drawing, and I said, is it something that could be remotely looking like what you are guys talking about? And they said, yeah, this actually, it makes sense, and please, like, work on it. So I went to my desk, and then I tried to, no, I was then asked to make this as a real thing on a slide deck, because we do a lot of slide decks for pitch clients. PowerPoint is a good thing. So yeah, it was kind of hard. Like because obviously the deadlines are really tight. Pitch project, so you don't have months to respond to a project. You have 5 days, 6 days. So it has to be snappy. So I was coming at 5 a.m. trying to work as well. So I went into a 3D software program. It was like so complicated. I couldn't think about anything, and so I took a step back, and I sketched a bit more, and we finally delivered this to the client, which was something more easily understandable for the client as well. Bye-bye background, dark background, because we had to fit with the client brand guideline. And the audience as well. We had to cater with the audience. These were like not necessarily tech savvy, so we had to sort of make it easily understandable for everyone. Unfortunately, we were super expensive, so we didn't get the project. Then I passed the probation. Yeah. First time as a consultant, they asked me to, because I was still the only designer there. It was a startup of 7 people, and we had a project, so they asked me, yeah, we need a data science guy, a data architect guy, and a designer. So please go on and see you in 6 months. We were asked to create a lab environment for this government-funded initiative in London. And they wanted to visualize the breadth of, it was all about the future cities. So they wanted to visualize the breadth of data in cities in 50 years. So all about like air quality, water, energy, population, age of the country, how they were doing, were they ready for those 50 years coming. So we were thinking of having a big interaction thing where people would move around with their hands and then select a country in the world and see how they were doing in terms of all those different variables like air quality, water, sustainability, resilience. And this ended up as being an air quality project in the Royal Parks. They had put a lot of sensors in London to capture the pollutants in London. And this is what we delivered as our sort of first end project. So this was, I worked with the data science guy, and we created this with 3.js at the time, so it was 2014, 2013. Good fun, so it got me to also see how the data scientist was working, so he showed me the code, and he couldn't try to figure out how to do the CSS, and because I'm a developer, I could help him do the bit of coding and try to fit and make it look better than what he had done in Python and R. So it was well appreciated, and they kept on having us for more months, so 3 more months there. Yeah, it was actually a 3-month contract, and then we got 3 more months because they thought that we were doing okay. So we actually had a real project about air quality, this time in Enfield. They had proper data, proper sensors, everything ready, and they had a 200K budget, the Council of Enfield, and they wanted to understand how they could manage this budget in order to improve the air quality in Enfield. So it was putting more bicycle in the street, putting more electric cars, or creating parkings. I think it was like 5 minutes walk from schools to avoid the traffic jams near the school parks. So this was the first sketches I've done, like all the different, capturing all the data I could work with, trying to sketch some interface, how we could actually see, like by pulling levers of if you put more money into bicycles, how does it affect the air quality in London, in Enfield. Come up with different sketches, a lot of iteration on this project. I actually have a folder of 3 gigabytes and 9 different iterations in my hard drive. So this was one of the outcomes. With all the different sensors, the data, timeline, during the day, it was sort of a live feed of how it was going. So on the right-hand side, this is where you were putting more bicycle, like putting more budget into bicycle or less into low emission, and how it would affect the air quality. So the gray is the actual, and the green is what you can see. So you were dragging left or right to see the impact you were having. And unfortunately, they came back to us saying, oh, sorry guys, we don't have all this data you were dreaming about. We only have 3 sensors in Enfield. Deal with it. So the data science guy is a smart guy. He said, oh, okay, we could take all the bus data, and whenever we see a bus delay, it means there will be traffic jam, which means there will be more pollution in the air. So this ended up as a heat map, as you can see on the bottom right. So this was done by the data scientist guy. So we were working together. Sorry? No. This is, so we stopped the sensors and we only tracked the buses, the bus data. So we had all the bus coming and live data of the live stream, all pretty live. It was 30 seconds lapse. And so I had to sort of redesign and go back to my sketches and say, like, how could we then, so it was all about the map. How can we simplify the map? So going through all these iterations again. So the idea was then to probably have 3 different screens for the 3 different themes, and how, so we could see all at the same time, and then see if they collide, what would be the outcome of low emission plus walk to school. So yeah, a lot of different iterations of the interface. And this is the final product that we delivered. Was a prototype demo with sample data of the bus presented at the council in Enfield, and it was very well received, and it's now a piece in this government organization as a sort of interactive thing. So you have this big touch table, and you can interact with it. It's kind of cool. Quite happy about it. So we were happy, and 6 months end, and I'm back at base, which means 6 months have passed, and they needed designers, obviously, because I was gone. So they hired designers. They had new projects. So I sort of felt out of place. I didn't have a seat, no project, no real thing to work on. It turned into a good thing, because then, so the CEO approached me and said, like, do you know After Effects? Because we would need to create some material. We have a product that we created, and we would like to anonymize it and then show it to other prospective clients. So it could be a good thing to have a video to show them. I said, yeah, I don't know anything about After Effects, so why not? Sounds like a good idea. And I got to do 4 of those videos. I got to code as well, because I'm a developer, obviously. I do HTML, CSS. They said, you could be a junior developer. Yeah, of course. So I was a junior front-end guy with the engineering team, and I helped them push the pixels. So they were like really talented guys, but they were not really design pushy. They didn't really care about the CSS and how it looked like. And I helped them. So I was doing a lot of D3.js. The right example is Shiny R. And I was going into the code of Shiny R, and don't ask me to do it again. I don't remember anything. But yeah, it was pretty fun, like to work with, like being an engineer for a year and work with them. And I also got to work on a good piece of research. So I put a user research hat on. They needed to create a project for data scientists. So in order to improve their workflow, so they could collaborate with each other, share insights, algorithm, all the stuff they are talking about in the dark. So I got to interview them. This is, on the left, is the stuff I've gathered from the interviews, like what are the different charts they were using, what tools they were using, the different systems, the problems they were facing, and the opportunities they wanted with this new software we could build. And then like wireframing, and this is sort of low, high fidelity wireframe that I presented to them. And then after that, they found a project for me, so moved on to the design side again, which was okay. So what I want to tell here is not, I actually love Big Bang Theory, but the thing here is, from what I learned is the data science people and the developers, they are all the same, and they all love superheroes, and they love Back to the Future, great movie, by the way. And we are all one family, and by working with them, I actually learned that working with multiple different brains is actually more powerful than just your own brain, and it opens up like great opportunities. So quick takeaways, because there is always takeaways. Take on new challenges. Don't be afraid of new things you don't know. Like in interviews, if you go to interviews, like if they ask you, do you know something? You say, yeah, of course, I'll Google it. I mean, Google is a great thing, and YouTube. So YouTube, guys. Sketching is the best tool and the cheapest of them all. Use it. Collaborate with non-designers and learn new stuff all the time. We only have one life, so make the most out of it. Thank you very much. Yeah. I mean,
So thank you. That was great. We can do a quick Q&A if there were questions for Gigi.
It's okay. It was self-explanatory. So.
One question.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation. You did that work in Enfield. Was it in Enfield Civic Centre that got it displayed? Do you know? Or?
It was. We were still at the government initiative, but we were working with Enfield people. So not sure. Sorry, don't know. Sorry.
Any more questions? I have one. I want you to provide the ultimate answer to the question if designers should code or not.
Yeah, they should.
Thank you. I'm glad we've settled that. Thanks. Please give us just 1 minute when we get the next speaker ready. All right, so the next speaker is going to be Amy Powell, and she's going to be talking about designing for innovation. So please give it up for Amy.
There we go. Yes. Cool. I'll start again. So my name's Amy, and I'm an illustrator who's currently on the MA Data Visualization course at University Arts London. I'm going to start by giving a brief outline of my previous career before diving into all the data stuff, because along with the theme of data visualization, I like to tell stories. So when I was a kid, all I wanted to do was draw pictures. I just never really knew what an adventure it would take me on. So after I graduated, I started working in a collaborative consulting environment as a graphic facilitator. I didn't really know what I was going into. Why would business consultants need creatives? I joined a department called the Accelerated Solutions Environment, and we ran workshops and events to help businesses solve complex issues. We provided them with the right facilitation, tools, and environments to help them, to allow them to be creative with their problem solving. I joined this crazy world where adults were running around with whiteboards, sticky notes, and Play-Doh. it was great fun. Instead of analyzing business problems in a statistical way, we were being creative with our solutions and providing clients with the right environments to think outside of the box. Illustration and design played a huge part in this. I was drafted into teams of consultants to redesign their problems and processes in a visual way that made it easier to communicate, especially when it comes to all the techie stuff. Illustrating it with characters and icons, it makes it seem more empathic and more human. We had a couple of mottos in our office, and one of them, which has stuck with me for a while, is you have to have fun with the problem to be able to solve it. So I spent 2.5 years using illustration in this information design format, but I felt like there were more skills that I needed to acquire to try and make my design more coherent and more up-to-date. So how does this relate to data visualization? The world of design is constantly changing and evolving. I sat in a lot of meetings and proposals where data came up as the key topic. There were constantly terms being thrown around like data is the new oil or data is the bedrock of our company. And I wanted to learn more about it. There are a few of them as well where just by visualizing their data in this format, they were able to solve their problems quicker. So the course has been a bit of a whirlwind. I actually took a massive risk. I quit my job and enrolled into university. I also ran away to Australia for a couple of weeks while I figured that out, but that is a different story completely. It's been a big whirlwind, especially going from an arts background and investigating all this theoretical design and visual facilitation, graphic design principles, which I'd only dabbled in before. To complicate it even more, we were kind of combining these skills with statistical databases and trying to find the right balance between creating something which is visually engaging, but also simple enough for anybody to read. So a couple of months back, we had some designers visit us for a workshop from Beyond Word Studio. Their work was exciting, it was engaging, and it dealt with a lot of global issues. They set us an 8-week brief to create a visual response to one of the UN's Sustainable Development Goals, and we had to document our research and experimentation as the project evolved. So when I started exploring these topics, I always found that I gravitated more towards the business side of things, but I think that's just after all those years of working with consultants, they're still in my head. So while conducting all this research, I dived quite deeply into the Global Innovation Index and International Labour Organization. I was trying to search for a connection between databases that I could try and combine to create something and tell stories. But also, I think quite a few of you are quite familiar with this, which is the Dear Data project. So since starting my journey with data visualization, I've been heavily inspired by the work of Georgia Lupi and Stephanie Posavec. I like the way that they embrace the complexity of the data and design, and it's the way for you to unravel. It's a bit like a technical puzzle, so once you start reading into the symbolism and abstract art of it, you're able to decode it and create your own narrative within the images. So I wanted to try and embrace this and see if there's a way that this could work for innovation. And whenever I start a project, one thing I always do is I strip it down and I kind of like start at the basic and just go through what each of the words mean. And innovation is about making something new and doing something that's different. Most of the visual responses I see regarding this they're quite simple and quite corporate. They try and simplify a process which is quite complex. Innovation isn't easy, and it often requires a complicated and carefully formulated process to get us there. We have to be constantly innovating to move forwards. I guess the intent of this project was to create a visual response that engaged a wide variety of people. I wanted to create something that was simple and intuitive enough for all the time-short consultants and analysts. But then I also wanted to try and create something that was engaging and creative to try and gain the attention of those who normally wouldn't engage with this kind of information. So this is an example that The Economist put out a couple of years ago. It's simple, it fits on one page, and it tells a story. But I wanted to try and make something that was a bit deeper, that had more layers to it. I wanted to try and make something more complex. So while I was doing all this research, I found 4 data sets that I could try and combine to try and show a narrative within how we build innovation in the world. So the International Labour Organization had this huge spreadsheet full of 22 years of data where they had gone through and estimated the employment sector of each country, and they broke it down into the percentage of people who worked in agriculture, industry, and services. And I was under the impression that if a country is a high innovator, that they have to have a well-balanced percentage in all. But that turned out completely wrong. So when I was trying to combine all of this data together, I also tried to put in about their GDP and population. There was a lot to match up. I started trying this in Python, as it's been something that we've been learning in this course, but I can use it to clean data, but to actually combine data, I kept hitting a lot of dead ends. So I went back and did this the old school way. Excel had to do the job. So one evening, I opened a bottle of wine and manually combined and pasted over all of each single entry that was needed to make this project work. And one thing that I learned from this is that wine and Excel don't mix. It leaves a lot of room for human error. I think it's like the data version of don't drink and drive. So it ended up as this was the draft for the interface. There was quite a few missing links, blank entries, and often complete outliers because of the sheer amount of data I was trying to work with. So in total, I think I visualized the innovation rating for about 130 countries, and it was heavy. There's another layer to it since. When I was trying to draft this out, I found that illustration actually played a huge part in it. I was quite happy that I went back and learned this all those years ago, because it was a really good building block to make the concepts for this project. And once I was experimenting with so many different shapes and lines that I could try and convey all of the information about GDP, innovation, employment sectors, all on one page. There's pages and pages of this. Once I was happy with some concepts that I made, I swapped to digital illustration, as for me, it's easier to articulate my ideas by drawing it, and by turning it into digital, I found it was a lot easier to throw out concepts for color palettes and also change around the combinations and also the sizes of different things on the page. Once I had all the clean data available, I used Illustrator to create this project, mainly on the chart tool. I was quite lucky that the innovation and employment sectors all worked out of a percentage of 100 because I could just group those together and make them in one batch. So the white bars are the innovation rating, and then the blue bars underneath deal with agriculture, industry, and services. To create the GDP and population, I used the pie tool and create them in batches again because I found it was a really good way to keep the proportions. And when you're dealing with so many different countries at the same time, everything kind of has to match up on the same scale. Another not so cool thing I learned from Illustrator is that you can actually break it if you use really big numbers. So when it came to all of this GDP, like billions and billions and billions of GDP, I had to go back into the data and turn all the countries down into decimal places to be able for Illustrator to then go and create it. So I ended up creating an interactive prototype that displayed the global innovation landscape, but everything was built around this small shape. It had a lot of flexibility to go and deep dive into the project. When I was making the prototype, I used InDesign and used links to match everything up and hyperlinks as well. So the idea was that you would start off with this little key, and as it goes through, you'll be able to click and reveal more about the proportions and the data that lies behind it. And then once you've explored the full key, you would then greet it with the home page, which then has the even more flexibility for you to deep dive into continents, into countries. I created it with like a hover over function as well, so you could just click, and then it would highlight the country's innovation rating. But then I went into it further in the prototype and went by different continents, and not by continents. Once you were in there, you were able to go by the GDP or the population or sectors of employment. I guess this is relating back to the Dear Data work that Georgia Lupi and Stephanie Posley did, because I wanted to create something that had a non-linear narrative that people could just go into and explore to their heart's content. So this was literally just a prototype. One thing that I really want to try and do is create it in the interactive format. We've started learning little bits of D3 on our course, but this is something that I've just dipped my feet into, and I'm still trying to find the right depth. Drawing with vectors is great, but actually trying to draw with code is a completely different skill that I'm still trying to get my head around. So while constructing this, there was a couple of narratives that showed up. As I said before, I thought that you had to have like a really well-balanced sectors of employment for you to be able to innovate as a country, but it actually ended up being the complete opposite. All the countries which had the highest employment in services were the ones who were actually innovating further. It was quite hard as well to get the proportions right because there were really big highs and really low lows. So trying to create everything on the same scale proved difficult. As you can see, there are some who completely like to dominate the landscape more than others. So where does this take me next? This university project has been a really good experience of trying to combine complex data sets to try and create stories. So one thing that I'm looking at doing at the moment for my final major project proposal, it's gone down a little bit of a political alley, and I'm trying to visualize the impact a no-deal Brexit might have on our supermarket supply chain, which even trying to get hold of the data of that at the moment is proven to be a struggle, but I guess it's going to be an adventure. One thing that I love about university, again, is that it's a safe space to play, and it's a safe place to make mistakes. You can constantly experiment and try new things, knowing that at the end of the day, like, everything's still going to be fine as it was before. But yeah, to say the least, I think it's going to be an adventure. Thanks for listening.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for Amy?
Of course. Does that tool exist? Can we look at that?
It's just a prototype at the moment that sits on my laptop. I'm trying to figure out the right skills that I need to actually make it as a tool, because at the moment, nothing like it exists, and there's definitely room in the market to do it. Exactly. Speak now, forever hold your peace.
Any more questions?
Which is the best and worst country for innovation?
The best was Switzerland.
So is that in terms of how many patents they? Oh, sorry. Yeah. Is that in terms of how many patents they get, or how much money they generate from their innovations, or how many number? What's the measure?
So diving into the Global Innovation Index, there's about 30 different indicators which they judge each country by, and one of them is patents, one of them is research, it's accessible education, it's like there's things to do like gender, diversity, inclusion. They just take everything.
But if you've got,
possible.
you could have everyone like gender equality and diversity and everything, but that doesn't mean you invent anything.
Yeah, it takes inventions. There's 40 different factors from the Global Innovation Index that then go and feed into how they calculate their results.
Right.
But you can see each of them individually online, and if you can actually, there's a huge tool that they've got where you can download the spreadsheets of each single country and see how they're ranked on each individual one.
But when you said about like equality and stuff, so if I've got a very equal society, but I'm not actually making anything new, do I still get a high rating for innovation?
I imagine so. I'm not quite sure how their algorithms work with how they calculate it.
Okay.
But I imagine it would be something that they would include.
Right.
Yeah.
Any questions? Yeah.
I know this is a student case, but can you quickly go back to that process that you followed? Because you quite skimmed over it, but it was quite interesting to see the process getting you into it, or at least for me.
This one?
No, before, where you actually did the step things.
Eyeballs and stuff like that, all the shapes going around.
That,
Arrows are everywhere, like orange and purple and stuff.
orange and purple. This.
Yeah, that one. Was that one?
No, the one before that. I think where you said the process to we're literally flipping back your entire
Sorry,
presentation.
I'm really confused. Which one? So keep going.
Yeah, keep going.
Oh, this
This
was,
one, with
yeah.
the process, is this the process you follow to come up with the ID, or?
No, this is an example of an illustration I did whilst working in corporate consulting.
Okay.
So it was an illustration of a process which actually happened to be fostering an innovation hub within a company.
Okay, cool. I tried to match that to it and went wrong in my head.
That's okay.
Any more questions?
How with the orange and purple, you had I saw on the right-hand side how to read this. How do you read it?
So going back to this one.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So this was something that two other creatives made, and it was a project called Dear Data, where two women recorded data on their daily lives, recorded on postcards, and then mailed it to each other from the US to London. So this was just more of like a visual inspiration, because what they do is they use a lot of symbolism, and it looks quite abstract, but when you read through what each symbolism means, you're able to construct your own narrative within it. Yeah, yeah. It takes a while to unpack it, but I guess that's what makes it quite rewarding at the end of the day.
We had one more question on this side.
It's not really a question. I just want to say thank you for the presentation. It's really good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Should I close it? Yeah.
Any more questions for Amy? Just talk to her. Thank you very much. We're going to do a 10-15 minute break. We'll try to solve our technical problems for the last presentation. If I can ask everyone to try to drink as much as you can, because last time we had some leftover beer. It was actually quite difficult to transport it out of the building. So if you can, I believe in you. So. All right, if I can ask everyone to start making their way back here, we're going to start in the next 2 minutes. Try to say something.
Ground control. 1, 2. How you doing, man? Happy to see you.
Okay, the last speaker tonight is going to be Zach. And I'm not going to even try to explain what he's going to talk about because I'm not sure.
You're trying to avoid pronouncing my last name?
Yes. All right, give it up for Zach.
Hi, it's nice to be here. Nice to be amongst everyone, old faces, new faces, friends. Thanks, Zdenek, for organizing this. Thanks to the Signal Noise crew. Yeah, really nice to be here. So this is a little bit of a different title from the one that I had previously. I figured what would be the most boring title that I could put as a placeholder. And then kind of halfway through, I thought, no, this isn't really cutting it. So I put the name of one of my favorite albums. I didn't really understand what it means, but then in the whole process of working with space and noise, it got a little bit of a different meaning. So in essence, I'm kind of going to talk about the difference between digital and physical space. And I'm going to talk about that through the context of an installation that I'm working on that I would like for it to be physical, but I'm prototyping it on web at the moment. To start off, I'll give you a little bit of background about me. So my name is Zach Ioannidis. I'm basically a technologist that works with, you guessed it, data. I like to work with data within interdisciplinary contexts, and that often means working in digital agencies. I like to be surrounded in environments where I'm working with designers, data scientists, and developers, and I kind of do a little bit of all these things, but I would say that primarily I'm a developer, and I work on the data science end of the spectrum. I got into this field, I think I was more drawn to fields that were more interdisciplinary. My first exposure, like as an internship, was with computational biology, and my background is in computer science, so I wasn't really feeling it until around the second year when I got exposed to the stuff that the New York Times were doing with the multimedia narrative and really nice, interesting ways of displaying information. And so that's kind of when I thought I could be using my skills to developing something which has a psychological aspect to it that has a visual output as well. So that journey kind of took me digital agencies. I started off in New York, and then I came here to work at a digital agency right around the corner. And then I was in Tokyo last summer for 3-4 months. Yeah, the past few months I opened my own company, mostly because I wanted to give myself a title and do these boardroom meetings where it's just you and you're like, the director, Zach, has decided to give employee Zach a raise of X money, and that goes on for 10 pages. I feel like there's parasites in the microphone. Can you hear that? Because it's kind of throwing me off. Yeah. Cool. Thank you. Okay. So this was a... Too many microphones. As part of my thesis, in 2016, I was kind of looking at the quantified self. And it was still 2016, so that was still on the tail end of cool. Disregard what has become of it now, but it was still kind of a prime space for conceptual exploration. I was kind of interested in the fact that we produce a lot of personal data, but it lives in very far and abstracted realms for us, from us. It's not really possible to look at that data, to experience it, and interpret it in more effective and emotional ways. So basically, I wanted to do some kind of provocations between that disconnect that we have with the data which defines ourselves, which define our personality in the sense that we always have more? Okay. A transactional nature with data. We're always producing data through our online behaviors across different services, and all of that data is commodified and is monetized by the big corporate giants. So I was also looking in the field of data physicalization, looking at the fact that data is kind of ephemeral, and what happens to our data, what happens to us after we die. I know that's a really big question. We can talk about it later. And part of this exploration that I had was I created this framework that would basically aggregate all of the different data points that you produce across a bunch of different platforms. I was looking at one platform called Moves that was then acquired by Facebook that had geolocation data. I connected Last.fm. I was basically looking at data from different points of daily activity, and then I thought, okay, I'm just going to get a thermal receipt printer, and I'm going to print these. I'm going to connect my phone so I can text and get a daily summary. One thing that I hadn't really factored in, and that was kind of ironic given the scope of the project, was that 2 or 3 months after I was done with it, I went to look at all the data footprints in the form of receipts, and I realized that they had faded. So I'm going to set up a timer because I don't want to go overboard here. Another thing that I was looking at was how can we make more interesting, more emotional ways of enabling and engendering like behavioral change. I created this thing called an augmented reflection mirror that lived on a Raspberry Pi that would basically, you would give it a parameter, so say you're training for a marathon and you would put a daily step limit that you would like to hit. That would distort, melt your face the further away you were from your goal. There wasn't really any research going into this, more so the fact that I wanted to test a hypothesis that maybe by creating these abstracted mappings of how far away we are from a particular point of data, how you could potentially affect data change that way or make people feel like they're more a part of that data ecosystem. I had the good fortune through my agency to go and work embedded at Google in Japan. This was the brand studio. And this was a project that looked at the gender divide within the Asia-Pacific region. We created these particle systems that we choreographed together in order to illustrate the different insights that we got from a bunch of different questions related to gender relationships in 11 different countries. Unfortunately, I don't have a link, but I can send one out. It's called Data Explorer. Another part of this project was also a data exploration framework that would allow people to query, filter the data from the back end, and basically, get their own views and look at potentially whether this gender divide is getting better or worse. And there is some really, really fucked up shit in Asia and fucked up perceptions. And you can kind of see that this is the more editorialized part, the storytelling experience, and it was done for a nonprofit foundation operating within Google called Women Will. But that's not really the topic of my talk today. So I'm going to take you way back to the 60s, make a massive detour, and because I'm going to talk about this group called the Situationists, I figured I'd use this word, which they loosely defined as a cultural hijacking or reappropriation of currently established aesthetics. The Situationists were a subsequent group from another one called the Lettrist International, and they were active in the 60s up until the mid-70s. These are all the associated terms that you could find with this on Wikipedia. And what they did basically as an entity was that they were against what they saw as the rising alienation and consumerism that was taking over the Paris of the time. So they wanted to bring that more into focus. And they did that by doing these little playful constructions or making word plays that were very surreal and very Dadaist. Let me say some of the following. So, be realistic, demand the impossible. One of the main slogans also of the 68 revolutions was, under the paving stones, the sea. So they were against what they saw as this rationalism that was coming in, this modernism, these very clean aesthetics that architects like Corbusier were bringing in this, very functional mode. Here's a representative trailer from around that time. It's a parody, a comedy movie called My Uncle. Deliberately mess up everything, all the elements in the house. Map nerds, I put this for you. This is a map from that time. They would basically have these. They created this concept called psychogeography. Psychogeography was how could we embed within the social sphere? How can we embed our personal experiences? So how can we change the way that we perceive space based on our emotional states when we're within that space? What you see here is a cut-up map of Paris where a bunch of different people put together what their mental manifestation of their experience is across different neighborhoods. So it could be that you say that within this quarter, I feel specific emotions, but within this quarter, my whole experience of how I'm perceiving the city and my mental affectations are changed. So what these lines are is the perceived emotional distance from one of these neighborhoods to another. And the width of the line is basically how many people go from one island to the next. And this is... Where is that? This one? Top square, yeah. Are you talking about the one that goes out of the map? Well, that's what they were against. They were against any kind of rationality. So I think maybe that's a form to show that. Again, there's not really... Yeah, like they would have a lot of, they would have a lot of games that they would play that would try to bring in disorientation. So it would be like, I'm using a map of Amsterdam to navigate the city of Paris, or I spot someone that has a yellow jacket and I'm just going to follow them around the whole city. So London is actually a very psychogeographic city and enables that kind of exploration. I remember when I started working around here, there were so many times that I got lost in these different alleyways of Shoreditch. That in Edinburgh. But yeah, Paris, during that time, they were building these really big streets for military operations, surveillance states, et cetera, and that's something that the Situationists were really into. Yeah. Well, I don't know it. I What's special about that?
It's in the center, right?
Yeah.
You know, and it's where all the tourists go.
Yeah. Even back in the 60s.
Yeah, but it's not too far away from where, like, the Eiffel Tower is.
Yeah.
When you go to Paris, that's, you know, usually where most people stay.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's the area you want to hang out in because that's what you're familiar with.
Yeah. Yeah.
So where would that be on that map? And how would you know?
So I think the way this collage has been made is that all of these different elements are the way you would perceive a map. They are generally in the same space. It's just how you mentally define a model, a segment of that map. Because it could be that you have one quarter of the city that's meant to elicit happiness, and you have another quarter of the city that's meant to elicit like fear. And I'm not an architect, but I guess by sculpting the space in such a way, it can be a really nice way to get people to stop being so repressed in different ways. And I think that they knew that what they were doing was very unrealistic, but I think a provocation in and of itself can be very useful in these kind of situations, especially when, like, sometimes as a society it feels like we're marching into the unknown without really any thought, or just like everything's accelerating. So
If anybody's actually really interested in this kind of thing, there's a really good book available online called Emotional Cartography, where it's a bunch of loads of different researchers have hooked people up to sensory monitors and made them walk around different cities. So there's like emotional maps of San Francisco, of London, and it dives into how they recall all the information and how they choose to visually represent it at the end. Emotional cartography.
By the way, everyone hates Oxford Street, even if you're blind.
I also hate Oxford Street. One thing that I'm really into is kind of the idea of how you can use machine learning, how you can use machine learning as a way of enabling performance, of creating these convivial interfaces where you can interact and interface and yield interesting results, be they aesthetic or even like a leap in your mental model, something different that you might not have perceived before. I wanted to put up on the web some pictures that I had, like a photo portfolio, but I didn't really want to follow a structure like this where you just go right to left. And I thought it would be really interesting thinking about it again in terms of a physical installation, and through that kind of context, what would it be like if we had this rectangular room where you could have one or more people just walking around. And this is a thing that the Situationists would do, and they called it drifting. You would basically walk around without purpose. What would it look like if you put these pictures, put these people within a space, and then take their coordinates and map that out to a digital space that's been created by an algorithm? In most of these cases, the way these digital spaces are created are based on the similarity of the entities within them. So physically, it can be that I'm here, you're here, we can be close together, and we can be completely different entities, but in a physical space, proximity usually means the two entities are similar in a predefined way that you've said beforehand. So I started putting my images together like this, and this is basically a color histogram. Then this is super basic stuff, but altogether, already you can start seeing a more interesting structure kind of emerging. But what I'm doing here is, this is basically a 2D reduced space, because these histograms might live in many different directions. I can also take like other parameters. I can take different tags from these images, and I can still get my algorithm to put them in a particular way. So I'm using a thing called Voronoi tessellations here to look at where the centroid of each of these coordinates is and create a surface area around that. And my thinking is, by creating these variable intensity layers, you could basically walk around, and the moment you cross the boundaries of one, it would start fading in and out of one another. But I'm not really interested in images. I was really interested in video, but this was a first step towards that process, and I was able to prototype it on the web. And this is kind of what it looked like when you're mousing over and it shows you different stuff. My idea was to just like get rid of this mosaic altogether, so you would just blindly be going around and you'd be getting similar images, navigating the latent space. So I wasn't really interested in doing anything with images, but I thought maybe the next bridge between that and video can be audio. So I found there were some data sets with free samples, and a digital artist called Carl McDonald generously includes a sample of around 120, a data set of 120 sound samples between 0 and 4 seconds. And I thought, this is interesting. I can start taking these and putting them in a space and start using like situationist methods to navigate that space and create interesting artifacts through an experience which is basically without purpose. It's just like a dumb algorithm, a dumb agent that you just have navigating the space with very simple rule sets, but then you're creating interesting artifacts within that. And how can you use this as a performative and collaborative means of having many different people in the same room and collectively creating together within different sides as you're interrogating the digital sphere within the physical space? In order to do this, I'd like to talk a little bit about an algorithm that came out a few years ago by Google that's called Tyvek. This algorithm is really interesting because it reveals the mathematical properties of different words. So what it does is it analyzes terabytes of data from Wikipedia, from any kind of text source, and it understands the hidden representations and relationships between words. It can understand that there's a high probability that two words are going to go together, or but then if you take that one level up, you start seeing the different concepts start coming in together. So it basically takes in a word and it creates this vector representation of the word in high dimensional space. This can be 50 dimensions, 100 dimensions, and the really interesting thing that can happen out of this is that you can ask it questions like, king is to man as what is to woman, and it will reply queen. So these are all ways that we kind of perceive or talk about concepts using our language. Of course, you can train a model on, or a set of values. You know